How about that?
Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the 2024 Gaming Advisory Commission. We'll start with roll call.
Alexander,
Present.
Zulno,
Present.
Dabberton,
Here.
Edwards,
Here.
Farrell,
Here.
Flores,
Here.
Miller, Rakos,
Here.
Zaney,
Here.
Benez,
Here.
Talon.
Here. We have 10 present and 1 absent. Okay, so for folks at home that are not familiar with the Gaming Advisory Commission, we get together once a year. We are a commission that's funded by ordinance based on a percentage of city revenue, and we use those dollars to fund not-for-profit organizations that submit applications that we review, and we make sure that all of our dollars go towards the city of Hammond, towards programs and services and organizations that belong to the city of Hammond, because these are city of Hammond taxpayer dollars that fund the organization. So I'd like to make that clear. Last year, we had approximately $523,000 that we were able to grant out to organizations. This year, our total currently that we are able to access is $421,686.71. So it's significantly lower than last year, and again, that's based on revenue that the city receives. The requests we have this year equal about $2.5 million. So I like to make it very open and public to all the organizations that watch and have submitted applications that we do the best we can to help with your requests, but because we are limited in funding, we unfortunately, we typically have to limit how much we give out to each organization, and we wish we could do more. We also, because we're, the amount that was requested compared to the amount we have is so different, we choose to handle sports organization requests at the end of our process. Not that they're not as important, however, there's a significant number of applications that are sports related. And so typically we like to make sure we're being fair to all the different organizations as far as how much we're giving. And the only way we can do that is to know how much money is remaining, and then we can typically divide it up in an equal fashion. So with that, we always have a work session prior to meeting publicly. So we talk through quite a few of the organizations that submit. I don't want folks at home that are watching to think that we're not asking as many questions as we should, or we're not talking through some of the requests maybe as long as you'd hope. We do that, and we handle it in the work session process. And we will talk a little bit about that from time to time publicly, but we do that to save on time and to make sure that the organizations, when they hear an amount from us, they know that that is the amount that we've already previously discussed. The last caveat I like to give out there is that although we may approve an amount initially, you may hear an approved amount initially today, by the end of the process, that amount could increase or decrease depending on how much revenue we have left over or how much money we are short. So I do need to make sure that anybody watching at home or watching the video is aware of that. We will not take an official motion to approve the dollar amounts for the organizations until the final meeting. Typically, this process is 3 or 4 meetings. I think, the goal for all of us is to make sure that happens again this year. So I believe that's how long the process will take. I will stop talking now, and we'll start working on the applications. The applications, for the most part, are put into alphabetic order. So if you don't hear yours right away, sometimes it might be coming up later on, depending how the application was structured. With that, let's pull out the first application that we have, which is Four Quarters for Life Community Organization. They made a request for $15,000. Yes, and this first, I was gonna, typically I'll give the funding, the purpose of the funding request. This one is sports related, so we are putting a hold on it, and we will come back to that at the end of our process. The next application is the American Veterans Collection, Inc. They have a request of $20,000. Their purpose of funding is used in a variety of ways, including assisting veterans during the giving seasons of Thanksgiving and Christmas. And they will continue to supply food and clothing, auto repairs, assistance, and auto insurance, and temporary housing. It says that their giving programs during November and December alone average between $15,000 to $18,000 per year. And when I'm going over the purpose of funding, I typically do shorten that. Some of them are very lengthy, so I'll give you a shorter version. So with that, do we have a suggestion for the American Veterans Collection Group?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest we award them $3,000 as we did last year.
We have a suggestion of $3,000. Is there any other discussion?
Second.
We're in agreement, or seconded? Okay, we will mark them currently for $3,000. Thank you. Next is the Apostolic House of, I probably said that wrong again, Mr. Dabberton, didn't I?
Apostolic.
Apostolic House of Prayer, Church of God, doing business as the House of Healing Kingdom Tabernacle. We have a request of $350,000, which obviously would be a significant portion of our funding since we only have $420,000 to give out. The purpose of their funding is they would like to open a daycare and after-school elementary tutoring lab. And there is requests in there for salaries and equipment as part of that process. Do we have a suggestion?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I suggest that we hold.
We have a suggestion to hold or right now pass on any certain amount. Is there any other?
Second.
We have a second on that. Is there any other? Okay, so we are in agreement. So right now we will put pass on that. Thank you. Next we have the Association for the Wolf Lake Initiative. Their request this year is for $600. I believe it's the same amount they requested last year. The purpose of their funding is they co-sponsor the Wolf Lake Watershed Advisory Committee meetings that they have. They typically host them at the Calumet College of St. Joseph. They also have other sponsors, including the Legacy Foundation. And typically they have, the request is for meeting materials such as food, drinks, and marketing that they do on the website. Do we have a suggestion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I suggest we give them the 600 they asked for.
We have a suggestion for 600. We have a second on that?
Second.
Do we have any other discussion? We will mark them down for 600. Next, we have Bishop Knoll Institute. They have a request for $50,000. Get to the purpose of their funding. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes the purposes are lengthy. This one is part of their Fielding Their Future campaign and the construction of an outdoor athletics facility aimed to achieve several goals, including improved athletic experience, educational benefits, and financial considerations. Do we have a suggestion for Bishop Knoll?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I recommend that we give them $5,000.
We have a recommendation of $5,000. Do we have a second on that recommendation?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
We have a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, we will mark them down for $5,000. Next, we have books, brushes, and bands for education, which a lot of us are familiar with. They have a request in for $30,000. I believe a lot of people are very familiar with their organization and what their purpose is. I know they also have a lot of different entities that they get funding through, as well as they do fundraisers. In fact, I spoke at a school just recently. I read a book to a second grade class, and that was part of a books, brushes, and bands project. So with that, do we have a recommendation for books, brushes, and bands?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I recommend an award of $10,000.
Second.
We have a recommendation and a second on that recommendation of $10,000. Is there any other discussion? Okay.
Mr. President, I
Yes.
do recommend that us review it if we have additional funds at the end, to see if there's something else we can help out with.
We'll put a revisit on the side there so that if at the end there's additional funds available, we can always look back to see if we can raise the amount that we are donating. I should mention to everybody who's watching at home that if any of the board members of the Gaming Advisory Commission are part of the organization that made a request, we do ask them to abstain from making any recommendations for amounts for that organization. However, we do ask questions of the folks that, if you're a board member, obviously you have intimate knowledge of that organization, so it can be helpful when we have questions about an organization. Next, we have the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Northwest Indiana. They have a request for $15,000. I know a lot of people are familiar with the Boys and Girls Club. The purpose of their funding is for an audio visual device, which they call the Lu Uno, which has a wide range of educational applications that supports the holistic development of children in three main areas: physical and motor skills, socio-cognitive ability, and academic development. They did put in their application that they did not use the $9,700 that we gave them last year, and that they were considering using whatever we approved this year with the combination of last year's donation for their purpose that they listed in their application. So with that, do we have a recommendation?
Chairman,
Yes.
I'll recommend that we hold at this time on that application.
We have a recommendation for a hold. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay, we will hold on Boys and Girls Club for now. Next is Cash Charity. They have a request for $10,000. The purpose of their funding, they listed that the way their board works is they have the ability to get funds in the hands of people in need in emergency services, so in a relatively short amount of time, that allows them to immediately help people that are displaced by fire to their residents. It also allows them to get through to families when needed with gift cards or coats or shoes or clothing as needed.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I make a move that we approve $3,000.
We have a recommendation of $3,000. We have a second there. We have a second. Is there any further discussion?
No.
We will mark down $3,000. Next, we have the Carrie Marie Social Service Agency. They have a request of $365,700. The primary purpose of their request, they gave a very lengthy budget, including the funding of 4 employees and a director for their facility. With that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I recommend that we pass on this. It's not designed for salary.
We have a recommendation to pass. Is there a second on that recommendation? Any further discussion? Okay, we will pass. And for those at home, we majority of the time, we try and stay away from funding salaries. It's not that it's completely against our initiative, but we try and focus mainly on programs and services and hope that salaries or employees of the organization are funded through other means. So with that, we'll move on to the next one. Catholic Charities Diocese of Gary. They have a request of $100,000. Primary purpose of their request is to help residents in financial hardship paying their rent and/or utilities. They also use the United Way Charity Tracker System to make sure the same people are not helped over and over, and the funds will go mainly to households in need. With that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we pass on the request. It's a great organization, but there's limited funds. So I'll move it.
Recommendation to pass, and do we have a second on that recommendation?
Second.
Chairman, I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? And I would concur that, sometimes we have organizations that offer duplicative services that we offer with the city. I know we have some of those same programs that we offer through our community development department in the city of Hammond, so we do some of those same services. Next, we have the Challenger Learning Center of Northwest Indiana. They have a request of $20,000. I know many people are familiar with the Challenger Learning Center. The primary purpose of their funding is really for their programs that they offer, their simulator programs, which obviously helps with children participating in hands-on STEM activities, so they're learning as they're having fun. So with that, do we have a recommendation for Challenger Learning Center?
Mr. President?
Yes.
I have a recommendation of $10,000.
Second.
We have a recommendation and a second of $10,000. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. President, I ask that we revisit this if we have additional funding.
So we have recommendation 10,000 with a revisit if there's additional funding at the end. Everybody's okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, we will mark them down for $10,000 for now with a revisit. Next, we have Christ Lutheran Church. They have a request of $20,000. The purpose of their funding, they said that they are a church with an annual budget of approximately $140,000, and they have a small congregation, but they look to give back to the community, and their furnace and air conditioning need to be replaced, and obviously that's part of the organization to help do what they're doing with the community, some of the services that they're offering. So with that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recommend $5,000.
Recommendation of $5,000. Do we have a second? We have a second. Any further discussion? We will mark Christ Lutheran Church down for $5,000. We have the Philistine Family and Health Center, again, an organization and facility that many of us are familiar with. Their request is for $40,000, and primary use of funding, they're looking to get a generator as part of their facility, and inside the Philistine, they do a number of different activities and a number of different services. So we won't go through all of them, but obviously the generator would be servicing that building. So with that, do we have a recommendation for a Philistine?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would suggest giving them 10,000 and maybe revisiting that.
I'll second that.
Second.
We have a 10,000 recommendation and second and third, and a potential revisit at the end of the session. Is everybody good with that?
Yes.
Okay, we'll mark them down for 10,000. Community Services of Northwest Indiana, formerly known as the Greater Hammond Community Services. They have a request for $20,000. The purpose of their request is they provide lawn mowing services for low-income seniors and the disabled who own and reside in the city of Hammond. They do partner with a landscaping company to help with that. With that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I recommend that we do a 10,000.
Recommendation for 10,000. Do we have a second on that recommendation?
Second.
There's our second. Do we have any further discussion? We will mark them down for $10,000. Dunebrook, Inc. has a request for $1,658. The purpose of their funding is in very small writing, and there's no way I'm going to read that. So, however, they are located in Michigan City, Indiana. So with that, do we have a recommendation?
Chairman, I'll move that we pass on the request.
We have a recommendation to pass. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, so we will go ahead and pass on the organization that currently is in Michigan City. Our next organization is Excel Youth Programs, Inc. They have a request for $50,000. Purpose of their funding, they want to fund programs, including a co-ed flag football league with police and fire department volunteers. They do after-school snacks. They contract with industry experts to talk with children. It includes insurance, program design, program development, field trips, equipment purchases, and they do list salaries as well. Mr. Hudson and his partner had come in and talked to the city as well about this kind of newer program that they're focusing on. And so with that, do we have a recommendation from the commission?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I recommend that we do 5,000 and if possible, revisit at the end.
Recommendation of 5,000 with a revisit. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
We have a second as well. Any further discussion? We will mark them down for 5,000 with a revisit. Family and Friends of Northwest Indiana, they have a request for $40,000. The purpose of their funding, they've added a homeless division center and domestic violence division to its facility that is located in Hammond, Indiana, which helps get homeless people off the streets, and it helps families dealing with domestic violence, puts them into placement, among other things that they do. Do we have a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to recommend the 10,000.
A recommendation for 10,000. Do we have a second on that recommendation?
Second.
Any other discussion? We will mark them down for 10,000. Firefighters Monument Corporation of Hammond, they have a request for $20,000. The purpose of their funding is they have been approved and are in the process of building a bike repair station behind their memorial, which is near the bike path at Central Fire Station. They'd like to have a concrete pad with repair station, water fountain, pavilion, and bench for rest and signage. And if there's other monies, they will use for mulching and landscaping around this initiative. Do we have a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I recommend 3,000.
We have a recommendation for $3,000. Do we have a second?
Second,
Any further discussion? We will mark them down for $3,000. For Love of the Arts has made a request of $15,000. They are located out of Lake Station, Indiana. Purpose of their funding would address the obstacle of transportation that many of what they call Shine Recovery Cafe members currently face. And it talks a lot about that specific program, which is transportation from their program. And as I said, I think they're located in Lake Station. So with that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I recommend that we pass. Our goal is to help the Hammond residents.
We have a recommendation to pass. Do we have a second?
Second.
There's the second. Any further discussion? Okay, we will pass. Fountain of Youth Adult Day Center has made a request of $313,250. The purpose of their funding is very lengthy, but obviously the amount they requested is a significant portion of funding that we have. So with that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President,
Yes.
based on the amount they're asking for, I would say we should pass at this time.
Recommendation to pass. Do we have a second on that recommendation? Any further discussion? Okay, we will mark them as pass. Girls on the Run of Northwest Indiana has a request in for $10,000. Again, many of us are familiar with their program. These funds, if received, would go towards their scholarship fund to provide financial assistance to girls from Hammond so they can participate in the Girls on the Run program regardless of their socioeconomic status. With that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend giving them 5,000 and possibly revisiting at the end.
Recommendation of 5,000 with a revisit. Do we have a second on that?
A second, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion? We will mark them down for 5,000 with a revisit. Hammond Boxing Club is the next, but they are a sports organization, so we will put them on hold from now until the end of the process. Hammond Central High School baseball team is sports organization. Hammond Central, I should say, is sports related. Hammond Central High School boys girls golf is sports related. Hammond Central softball team. Hammond Central Wolves football team is also sports related. So we'll put those all on hold until the end. That takes us to Hammond Community Watch. They have a request for $10,000. In this case, Councilwoman Venez will abstain. She is the president of this organization. Hammond Community Watch, purpose of funding will be to offer the Ring Doorbell program for residents in the city of Hammond, which also works in partnership with the Hammond Police Department, because we typically look to residents with the Ring Doorbell program to help us when there's issues in the community or neighborhood. So with that, do we have a recommendation?
Chairman, I'll recommend $10,000.
Second.
We have a recommendation second of $10,000. Any further discussion? We will mark them down for $10,000. Hammond Education Foundation has a request in for $35,000. Councilwoman Alexander is abstaining in this. She is a board member, I believe, in this organization. The purpose of their funding is lengthy. So I will just say that, again, a lot of folks are familiar with the Hammond Education Foundation and the different initiatives that they provide. So with that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President, I recommend that we hold. This group does have additional funding, so we could review this application later.
So we have a hold to revisit at the end. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Any other discussion? Okay, we will revisit at the end of the process. Hammond Hermits Athletic Association is a hold because it is sports related. So we go to Hammond Hispanic Community Committee, and we have a request for $3,000. The purpose of their funding is lengthy, but it talks about assistance to fund their biggest annual event that hosts over 500 community families and children in the city of Hammond. With that, do we have a recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend we award them the $3,000.
We have a recommendation for $3,000. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have second. Any other discussion? We will mark them down for $3,000. The Hammond, Indiana Hurricanes is sports related, so we will revisit that at the end of the process. Next is the Hammond Mohawks Athletic and Conservation Club. They have a request for $10,000. This is towards the Hammond Mohawks Parade that they put on every year. Do we have a recommendation?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I recommend that we award $3,000.
Recommendation for $3,000. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Is there any further discussion? We will mark them down for $3,000, which ancillarily is what we were able to do for them last year. Hammond Morton High School football program is on hold because it is youth-related. Hammond Optimist Youth Sports will be looked at the end because it is sports, I said youth-related, sports-related. And we have the Hammond Parks Foundation. They have a request for $25,000. We had a good discussion on this. This is not the city of Hammond, it's a foundation outside of the city. And the purpose of their funding would be to bolster the education, the foundation's depleting investment accounts and assist in increasing the donations and funding of the supported programs. During our discussion, there were questions that came up with this organization, so we're going to talk to the CEO of the organization, and once we have those answers, we will revisit this application.
Mr. President, this is the same group that does the flower giveaway and the Halloween dance for the children, so they do other dances as well.
Very good. Good information to have. That wraps up the organizations that we were able to discuss in today's work session prior to. One thing I forgot to note at the beginning of the session is that the Gaming Advisory Committee is made up through ordinance of 11 members. I am put in as the chairman of the organization because I'm currently the chief of staff for the city of Hammond. And then we have 5 members that are the mayor's appointees. That is Tom Dabberton, who represents the 1st District, Andrea Edwards, who represents the 2nd District, Lori Zolno, who represents the 3rd District. I reside in the 4th District. Darlene Flores represents the 5th District. Sharon Zaney represents the 6th District. The council appointments are Councilwoman Katrina Alexander, Councilwoman Janet Venez, Councilman Scott Rakos, Melissa Farrell, and Leslie Miller. I should have mentioned that at the beginning, so I just wanted to bring that up at the end. So with that, I know we're doing a roll call at the end of the meeting. Before we do that, is there any other discussion or anything anybody wants to bring up? Okay, go ahead with the roll call.
Alexander,
Yes.
Zolno,
Yes.
Dabberton,
Yes.
Edwards,
Yes.
Farrell,
Yes.
Flores,
Yes.
Miller, Rakos,
Yes?
Zaney,
Yes.
Venez,
Yes.
Talon.
Yes. 10 approved, 1 absent, and that will end our first session. Thank you.